Hey everyone, Rob from the ProWresBlog here, www.ProWresBlog.blogspot.com. Hey, back again with some more USWA Championship Wrestling from January 30th, 1993. Shows start out with the Harris brothers talking their usual brand of trash. One of them said, "I told you we're the baddest tag team in the world today. Can't nobody come close to us anytime." Just their usual mayhem and all that. And then they jumped in for their squash match, which was the Bruise Brothers versus TD Steele and Johnny Jet. I don't have any memories of Johnny Jet. I don't think I've ever seen him before, and this is the first time. TD Steele is kind of a long-term USWA jobber. They had Mike Samples on the mic for this destruction, and he said, "They're the biggest, they're the toughest, they're the meanest. They won't be beat by anyone at any time, and that includes you, Dave Brown." I like the thought of Dave Bryan trying to stick up to the Harris brothers. I'd watch that. Um, yeah, they just beat the crap out of the Jobbers and really destroyed TD Steele. Near the end of it, they started like hitting all kinds of shoulder breakers and just working all over his arm, and that's how they put the end to it. I'm not sure what the result was here. I really don't know because they said the ref put a stop to it because it was just too much of a whooping. But then they started pushing the ref and doing other stuff, and they may have been DQ'd. Dave Brown brought that up, and I don't know. They never really talked any more about it, so I guess we'll never know. Oh well. Um, Eventually, they started hitting the ref, Paul Neighbors, and Paul Neighbors just had absolutely enough of it, and he went after Samples. That was a really cool moment. He nailed Samples and just jumped all over him. Unfortunately, he paid for it as the Bruise Brothers beat him up, and they had to get Lawler and Jarrett out to stop. They cut some more promos then after with the Bruise Brothers, Samples, and Apprentice. There was some pretty good stuff. I was rather entertained. Samples had a good line. He said, "Though I walk through the shadow of death, I fear no evil because walking beside me are Mr. Deadly and Mr. Unpredictable. Evil incarcerated, the Bruise Brothers." I like that. We then went back to the studio here. Eddie Moreland and Mike Samples were out there. Moreland was cutting promos on him saying how he told him not to touch USWA officials before, and he's going to be paying a fine for it. Samples blamed the ref, which was pretty cool. And he said, well, the ref should have to pay it too because he got into a fight. And actually, Moreland agreed. He's like, you're right. He kind of didn't have much to say. Neighbors tried to say that he didn't have enough money to pay for it, to pay for the fine. And Moreland really wasn't buying it. Moreland had this really great line. He said, "You know the rules. You should know the rules better than anyone in professional wrestling. You're a referee." I like that. That was a good one. Samples then brought up some stuff. He said he used to be the bookkeeper in the USWA, and when he would go over the books, he never saw one single thing about fines. He said that all the fines go straight to Eddie Moreland's pocket, and Eddie Moreland was pretty much dumbfounded by this. He had nothing to offer in exchange, and I think Samples won that one. Samples then offered Neighbors a deal where they'll do a boxing match, and if Samples wins, he'll oh man, hold on one second. Okay, Samples said he'll pay the fine if he wins, and if not, Neighbors will have to pay his fine and all that. And then there was a neat line. Eddie Marlin brought up that Samples was suspended. Like I said, I'm starting from '93 here, so I might have missed some stuff. And Samples said, "Well, I'm suspended. Okay, fine. I can't wrestle, but I can box. Nobody says I can't box." And they they went for it. And actually, I want to update what I said. Samples basically said he'd pay the $2,000 fine if he loses, and then if Neighbors wins, he'll be cleared of all fines. Next, they had my favorite moment in the show. They had the Punisher, Mr. Clyde, come out, and they have the new Moondogs. I mentioned earlier in the show about a new Moondog named Moondog Splat, and he came out. They really put him over well. Richard Lee was kind of subdued and walking slow, and they really put over how big he is. Dave Brown said this on Moondog Splat. He's huge, fans. There's sometimes when television doesn't tell the whole tale when it comes to the size of a wrestler, and this is one of those times. They had a big old stare down with the Moondogs and Lee versus the Bruise Brothers and Samples, and the Bruise Brothers and crew ended up walking off without touching anyone. Keep that in mind in the next few minutes. We then went to our scheduled match with the Moondogs versus Mr. Clyde and the Punisher. just total whooping here. The Moondogs used chairs, and it was totally legal, which, that's kind of that old ECW logic. Punisher had some really schizophrenic selling here, which I kind of liked. And the Moondogs ended up winning by DQ because the Bruise Brothers and their crew jumped all in and they beat up the Dogs. The Jobbers even got into it, and Splat made his comeback and cleared everyone out. He hit a big splash, and um, Burt Prentice got in, and Splat nailed him. And Burt had a really nice sell, and he was running for cover like it was the end of days. Richard Lee then came out and he said, "Mike Samples, Burt Prentice, what you did is unleash the Moondog Wrath. My dogs are back, baby. We're bigger, we're badder, and we're than we've ever been, brother." And Lee said they were coming to get their belts back because they were ours. We then got some clips of Doink the Clown and Brian Christopher, because Doink the Clown was coming in, and Dave Bryan had to hold back the laughs on this one, because even he made some funny faces looking at it, because it's Doink the Clown. And it's kind of funny too, because with all the weird gimmicks you'd see in Memphis, Doink the Clown would really not be that odd, but they kind of made a point to mention that, yeah, it is. Brian Christopher then cut a small promo. The big thing was he said he cut Mike Miller and he fired him because he couldn't get the job done. And yeah. Then Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler got on the mic. JJ said, "You want to talk about clowns? Well, that's all you and Doink and all your associates are." And JJ said, "You and the WWF, bring them all down. We're going to show you what type of circus is really going to be happening." We then got Richard Lee with his Moondogs doing promos. Lee brought up that his cast was healed on his arm, and they had the Moondogs making some goofy faces, which was cool. And Lee had this really great line about Moondog Splat. He said this: "You want to push someone around? Push Splat around. I named him Splat because that's the last sound you're ever going to hear." And I just thought that was really clever. We then got a little promo with the debut of PG-13. They did a Naughty by Nature song, and they kind of changed the words to it and rapped, and they did a decent job here. I like that one. Even Burt Prentice then came out and brought up that they were going to be good, and then he had some more to say. He said he was going to be fighting Miss Texas, and he said this: "I'm going to be able to show the world who Bubba Johnson really is, because the match is not over until one person has their clothes ripped off their body." And it was some kind of street fight or something, and Miss Texas had enough of it, and she came down, and and they ended up getting into it, of course. Texas had a really nice line. She said, "Listen, when I get you in the ring, I'm going to rip all your clothes off because I'm not too sure about you myself." And then Burt said, "Oh, you're not? You sure about this?" And then he absolutely pancaked her in the face, and she went down hard. She eventually got up and just flurried all over Burt and really sent him laying until Eddie Marlin came out and cleared her off. We then got our main event. We had Brian Christopher versus Danny Davis. The usual Brian Christopher shenanigans early on. He fooled around, did all his posing. He got caught. He was doing some really kind of weird strut on the apron, and Danny Davis nailed him when he wasn't looking, and he went down hard. Christopher hit a sunset flip here and then was doing poses while he was ended up sitting on Danny's chest, and you know what happened here. This is Memphis, so there had to be a funny finish. And Burt Prentice ended up getting involved, and he held Danny Davis while Brian Christopher beat him. Jeff Jarrett came down to clean house, and that pretty much ended the show. The match was actually decent. It was probably the only real competitive match we've seen this month so far, because everything's been all squashes so far. Just squash up squash, and everything that hasn't been has had dirty finishes. Well, this had a dirty finish because that's just kind of how it works in Memphis. But whatever. I enjoyed the match. The crowd was hot, and the work was pretty good. Like I always say, Danny Davis is one of the most underrated wrestlers out there. He's always just really good and real fiery, and he's just a fun Southern face. And that was it here for the show. Overall thoughts on this one. I like the show. Moondog Splat was really good. They made him look like the Terminator early on, and they kind of exposed him a little when they had him out there because he was a bit slow and just resorted to shots over the head, which kind of got old, but whatever. Splat looks really cool, and he looks like a bad dude, and I just really bought into the Moondogs here. He looked like a good fit, so I'm all for that one. Mike Samples, again, was very good, as he always is on these shows. he was just funny, and he brought up different points that you wouldn't expect. He just has some really good lines, and he really seems to think out everything he says ahead of time because he always finds new angles. And the good thing is he can really bring out like different shades of gray out of the wrestlers. Like he makes Eddie Marlin not seem so angelic and all that, and everybody else. And he kind of points out the faults of some of the faces, like a Jesse Ventura was. And I guess I can appreciate that because he does a good job. So overall, I think I recommend checking this one out. I think everyone will like the Moondog stuff, and yeah, that was definitely the highlight. And Burt Prentice in Texas was good, and the main event wasn't bad. So check it out if you get a chance. All right, everyone, that's going to be it this time. If you want to see the review here with lots of pictures, gifs, and more quotes, check it out at www.prowresblog.blogspot.